Hello, friends, and welcome to Jewels of Truth. Thank you for joining us once again. Today, I would like to ask a question. Does America belong to the Pope, who is the Antichrist? Does America belong to the papacy? I'm going to be reading here about from a book by a man named Averell Manhattan. The book is entitled The Vatican-Moscow-Washington Alliance. And I'm going to read some words from his book. The chapter is chapter 32, The Threat to America. And the heading in this chapter that I'm going to read from is The Catholic Claim to America. And this is what Averell Manhattan says. It must never be forgotten that the Catholic Church maintains long historical vistas. One of these, so far as the Western Hemisphere is concerned, is that the whole of North America should, by historical right, be Catholic. It was initially stolen from her by the heirs of the Reformation, that is, by the Protestants. That's how the Catholic Church views North America, that it was stolen from her by the Protestants. There is a firm historical foundation for such a claim. Now, I don't agree with this entirely with this paragraph, but I'm going to read it anyway, just to show you what he's saying here. There is a firm historical foundation for such a claim. It must be remembered that the Americas originally were put on the map not by Protestants, but by Catholic discoverers and navigators. And I admit that that is true. The Americas should be under the jurisdiction of the Catholic Church for the same reason that, say, Australia, which was discovered and colonized by Protestants, has remained under the Protestant British umbrella to this day. Now, that part I disagree with. In 1493, 1 year after the discovery of America, Pope Alexander VI, as Vicar of God, to whom belonged the entire earth, granted the New World to the Spanish sovereigns, proclaiming that all lands discovered and to be discovered west of a line 100 leagues beyond the Azores belonged to Catholic Spain. Now, going back to this paragraph here, it says that the Pope, Alexander VI, Vicar of God, the entire earth belonged to him, and I'm sorry, but that's just simply not true. The Lord God of heaven owns this earth. But going on in this paragraph, we of our own motion, this is what they said, we of our own motion and by the fullness of apostolic powers, the Pope proclaimed, do give, grant, and assign to you, let me back up here. The Spanish sovereigns proclaiming that all lands discovered and to be discovered west of a line 100 leagues beyond the Azores belonged to Catholic Spain. This is what these Spanish sovereigns, these kings, this is what they said. We of our own motion and by the fullness of apostolic powers, they proclaimed, do give, grant, and assign to you, Pope, your heir and successors, all the firm lands. In other words, all of the popes that succeeded this Pope Alexander VI, do give and grant and assign to you, your heirs and successors, all the firm lands and islands found or to be found, discovered or to be discovered, toward the west and south, drawing a line from the pole Arctic to the pole Antarctic, that is, from the north to the south. So they've just proclaimed all of the land from the North Pole to the South Pole and the Americas as belonging to the Pope. Okay, so now the writer of this book says that the Church's original program called for Catholicizing the entire Western Hemisphere. These were not fantasies, but well-calculated plans. Most of them were promoted by nations subservient to the Catholic Church, first by Spain, second by Portugal, and third by France. When Protestant discoveries and explorers from countries such as England, Holland, and others landed in America, the Catholic Church set in motion a new grand strategy to prevent them from gaining a firm foothold. The Spanish Empire became the cutting edge of her plan. The commercial and colonial rivalries of England and Spain did the rest. The inevitable decline of Spanish power in the New World prior to, during, and after the American Revolution compelled the Vatican to adopt yet another operational design. The birth pangs of the American Republic were watched with careful attention. By who? By the Vatican. These were considered at once as providing a golden opportunity for the progress of Protestant England and therefore the Protestantation of the newly born United States of America. Once deprived of a strong protecting power like that of England, the Church reasoned that an independent America would be less antagonistic to the establishment of Catholicism. So those of you Catholics out there who are proud of the historical fact that apparently there were some Catholics that maybe signed the Declaration of Independence, maybe the Constitution. Their motive was to separate the Americas from England, and England was Protestant. So if they could separate England if they could separate America from England, then they would be better able to infiltrate America with Catholicism. This would be especially true if its independence had been obtained with the help of Catholic powers like France, which indeed it had. Yes, America was helped by France to obtain its independence from Britain, and France was Catholic. Hence, the Catholic policy of encouraging the American colonists to free themselves from Protestant England. So the Catholic clerics, they encouraged the American colonists to free themselves from Protestant England. But of course, what was their motive? Franklin, that is Benjamin Franklin, and the other founding fathers, therefore, once the Catholic help had been received, obliged the Vatican by permitting it to establish a Catholic hierarchy on American soil, a small payment for the effective help given by Catholic France with the approval of the Vatican. So you could say to it's unfortunate that the American founders, they were kind of hoodwinked by the Catholic Church in this matter, but you know, the American colonists, they were put in a very difficult position because they were trying to obtain their freedom from Protestant England. So France helped them. The establishment of a Catholic hierarchy, however, did not immediately prove strong enough to stem the tide of Protestant expansionism on the new continent. The young nation was seized with the fervor of acquiring new lands. The Louisiana Purchase, if it appeared to be a bargain for Napoleon, was a veritable heaven-sent gift to the United States. With its acquisition came a taste for annexing even more non-Anglo-Saxon territory. Within one generation, the ferocious appetite for more space resulted in the seizure of the Mexican territories of Texas and California. From the Vatican's point of view, these dominions, which previously had belonged by right to the Catholic Church, had made the United States a territorial colossus, which unless stopped, could transform the whole of the North American continent into a Protestant stronghold. This meant that besides crippling the growth of a strong Catholic presence in the New World, that of Protestantism would be virtually unlimited. Since the American Revolution, Protestant sects had multiplied with the fertility of biblical mushrooms. It was clearly in the interest of the Catholic Church then to intervene in the American Civil War. A territorial split into two separate sovereign nations would have likewise halved the Protestant establishment. So, the Catholic Church intervened in the American Civil War. What did they do? Although the Vatican no longer had at its disposal the Catholic Spanish Empire or Catholic France to act on her behalf, she still retained one major weapon, namely her diplomatic influence in Europe. Examined within its historical context, the Church's grand strategy will thus be seen to be quite logical. When the Spanish Empire had collapsed, the ecclesiastical monopoly of the Catholic Church in those lands, formerly under the rule of Spain, collapsed with it. The Church's monolithic influence, which had stretched from the tip of South America to the northernmost point of California, was fragmented. Catholic hegemony was likewise fractioned and enfeebled, both denominationally and politically. The same formula would have applied to Protestant America if the South were victorious in the Civil War. The diminution of the U.S. stature would have spelt the automatic diminution of American Protestantism. This, in its turn, would have permitted the potential expansion of Catholicism into two smaller countries, where Protestantism would no longer suffocate a young Catholic Church. Publicly, the Vatican maintained a posture of neutrality. Behind the scenes, however, her activities were anything but neutral. While issuing pious words of regret, the Pope and his advisors were preparing to aid the Confederacy in its fight against the North. So, ostensibly, the Pope was saying something like, oh, we regret this war between the North and the South, which the popes are famous for that kind of hypocrisy. But at the same time, while they were issuing pious words of regret, the Pope and his advisors were preparing to aid the Confederacy in its fight against the North. One day, to the surprise and anger of the Union administration, but to the jubilation of the Confederate States, Pope Pius IX addressed a letter to the President of the United States, and that would have been, of course, Abraham Lincoln. I'm sorry, I didn't read that right. Let me read that last sentence again. One day, to the surprise and anger of the Union administration, that would be the Lincoln administration, but to the jubilation of the Confederate States, Pope Pius IX addressed a letter to the President of the Confederacy. And who was the President of the Confederacy? Jefferson Davis. So here it reads, here's this letter. To Jefferson Davis, President of the Confederate States of America, Richmond, we have just received with suitable welcome the person sent by you to place in our hands your letter dated 23rd September last, 1863. Not slight was the pleasure we experienced when we learned from those persons and the letter with what feelings of joy and gratitude you were animated. Notice how he addresses Jefferson Davis, illustrious and honorable President. When you were informed of our letters to our venerable brother John, Archbishop of New Orleans, and John, Archbishop of New York, dated October 18th of last year, after expressing, now the writer of this book says, after expressing hopes for peace, the Pope concludes thus, quote, "It is particularly agreeable to us that you," notice, "illustrious and honorable President," Jefferson Davis that is, "and your people in the South are animated by the same desire for peace," etc. Really? Was he really animated for the desire for peace? And then the letter ends, given at Rome, St. Peter's, 3rd October, 1863. Now, the writer of this book, Alvaro Manhattan, he continues, "The supreme importance of the papal letter was not its message, but the fact that the Holy See had recognized, notice, recognized Jefferson Davis as the president of an already sovereign new nation sundered from the Union, or separated from the Union." So, the Pope is encouraging this separation by recognizing Jefferson Davis as the president of the Confederate South. The Pope made the Church's official position clear by addressing him as Jefferson Davis, President of the Confederate States of America. This meant that in the eyes of the Vatican, the United States had become two nations. Pius IX, in fact, referred in his letter to the United States as these countries. That is, the country of the North and the other country of the South. A fait accompli. The Pope's avowed support for the Confederacy had widespread results both within the two warring factions and outside as well. Dudley Mann, a prominent Confederate diplomat, wrote, "The influence of that measure, the Pope's letter on our behalf, is incalculable." The Pope's letter had an immense influence to separate the United States of America, North from the South, during the Civil War. Is this a church that we are to respect today, that Americans should respect, that we should even have a ambassador to the Vatican? Dear people, the Catholic Church and the Jesuits are bent upon destroying this nation. Take warning. Wake up, America. If you have any questions about this presentation, then by all means you can place your comments at the bottom of this video. And if you like this presentation, then by all means tap that like button. And if you haven't subscribed, then by all means subscribe. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day.